Well, here's the headline in the Washington Times this morning. Gitmo debate goes to Heartland. They write that Illinois prison to house as many as 100 terrorism detainees. And this facility in Illinois sits in Thomson, Illinois. Thomson is one of the cities represented by our next guest. It's Congressman Donald Manzullo, 16th District of Illinois, Republican. And Congressman, when you first heard this news, what was your reaction?
Well, I got 12 hours notice. And I've been a member of Congress now for going on 18 years, and the administration gave me exactly 12 hours notice that this was going to happen. This was going to happen in the congressional district that I represent. So I really wasn't too pleased with the fact that a lot of other people knew, and the fact that the Department of Defense, when I talked to a high official there, was absolutely shocked that nobody had informed me prior to that. So I was not pleased with the fact that the administration did not take the courtesy to advise the member of Congress that something like this was coming. But nevertheless, that prison has been empty, virtually empty for years. It was a state prison, cost about $140 million to build. Built because the state of Illinois is at over 150% capacity. I've always been in favor of opening up that prison. Obviously, first as a state prison, and our office has been in contact with the state of Illinois prison authorities for years, saying, goodness gracious, if you don't open it up for a state facility, at least lease or sell it to the federal government to bring in all the economic growth that will come with the positioning of a prison in that area. So, that's what we have, and ironically, the economic impact study that the White House put out, if you just accept half of that, there's enough revenues in there going to the state of Illinois in terms of state income tax and state sales tax to open up the facility as a standalone Illinois facility. So we're really perplexed as to why the governor of the state of Illinois, the one that replaced the impeached governor, simply refuses to open up the state of Illinois facility when there's enough revenue there to open it up for Illinois criminals. Because a few years down the line, people in Illinois are going to build another facility which will probably cost $200 to $300 million to house all the criminals.
Phone numbers on the bottom of the screen for our guest, Congressman Manzullo, Republican from Illinois. Lines for Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. And we're talking about the Obama administration's decision to move some Guantanamo detainees to this prison in Illinois, which sits in the congressman's district. Do you share, Congressman, the safety concerns that have been pouring out, at least from the Republican side at this point?
Well, the safety concerns are coming from everywhere. You'd be surprised at Democrats that I talk to that are breathing a sigh of relief that this facility is not located in their district. Let me give you the name of 3 Democrats that don't like the fact that Gitmo is not being closed. It's being moved. Even the ACLU is upset with that, because the personnel, the operations, everything that goes on at Gitmo will be occurring in Thomson, Illinois. Governor Sebelius, when she was governor of Kansas, fought and won a battle with the President of the United States, and subsequently she was appointed head of HHS, over the fact that she did not want these terrorists located in Leavenworth. She never feared that they would escape from Leavenworth, as I don't fear that they would escape from Thomson, but she said essentially they would become a magnet to attract terrorists from around the world, and the area around the prison, for a huge area around there, simply would not be safe. It would become an environment that would attract these international terrorists. Senator Lieberman, Jim Webb says the same thing, and in fact I had an extraordinary conference in my office with Phil Carter, who is the #1 person in charge of detainees, and I said, now my understanding is whoever's left at Guantanamo Bay when it closes operations there and moves to Thomson would go to Illinois, and he said yes, there could be as many as 215 at this point. And I said, now even if it's 100, this would be the largest concentration of incarcerated international terrorists in the United States. And he said, yes. And I said, and the reason that Gitmo is being closed, he said, well, it's because it's hated so much by the international terrorists, that the stigma is there, that it serves as a recruiting card for Al-Qaeda. And I said, so they really, really hate Gitmo? He said, absolutely. They just boil over with vitriol. He said, yes. I said, what's to keep that hatred from transferring from Gitmo to Thomson? Because you're not closing Gitmo, you're simply moving it. And he said, well, obviously, he said, there will be, some kind of an increased threat in Thomson. He said, however, I have no way to measure the extent of it. He said, but I'm sure the Department of Defense, operating with the local law enforcement agencies, can, quote, manage the risk. And I was shocked. I said, if you have no way of estimating the increase in threat, how could you possibly even consider moving a facility that's secure at the tip of an island surrounded by waters and sharks to a facility in the Midwest surrounded by melon fields, hay, soybeans, and corn? And that began this inquiry, because what we also found out is the fact that this concentration of terrorists is unlike the terrorists that are presently being housed in American prisons. Let me give you an example. There are about 340 so-called domestic or international terrorists, according to Harley Lappin, who is the head of the Bureau of Prisons. Department of Justice puts it at about 217. But let's take the higher figure. Of the 340, approximately 220 are already mainstreamed in with the regular general population of the federal prison system, which is about 208,000 people. And they really don't present a threat any greater than the normal federal prisoner, whatever that person may be. The remaining 120 are spread among 3 institutions: Terre Haute, Indiana, Marion, Illinois, and Leavenworth, Kansas. I'm sorry, and Florence, Colorado, Supermax. But among those 120, you may have only 10 to 15 that have international ties. And those 10 to 15 are spread throughout those three particular prisons. So when people say, well, we already have these terrorists in prison here and there's never been a problem, that's not the correct response. That's comparing apples to oranges. And besides that, it's up to the government to prove that having a huge concentration of Taliban and Al-Qaeda terrorists housed in rural Illinois, and as to these people, the government plans to give absolutely no trial, either a trial in the federal courts or a trial in military tribunal. It's up to the government to prove that that transfer threat will not occur.
Congressman, let me...
they're not prepared to do that because they can't do that.
Let me jump in. We do have folks
Yes.
who want to get in with their calls.
Okay.
All that being said, there is a quote in the Washington Times piece by the governor, Pat Quinn. This will be the most secure facility of all time. And we go to Spokane, Washington
Well,
first.
there's no question about it being secure, but we're not worried about people breaking out. I mean, that's what security means. It means the prisoners breaking out, and we're not worried about that.
Let's get that first call. Spokane, Washington. William, Republican, you're on the line.
I keep hearing how secure this prison is, but if you recall history, back in the 80s, in my home state of Virginia, a half a dozen inmates just walked off death row in one of the most secure prisons at the time. And so saying it can't be done is sticking your head in the sand. And that included the notorious Briley brothers back in the day. They've all since been recaptured and executed, but it can be done. That was supposed to be the most secure prison in the United States, and they just walked out of there. So think about that before you bring them people here. And I'm a veteran.
Well, it's a
Thank
good point.
you, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks,
Merry Christmas,
Congressman. And a reaction there, Congressman.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, almost anything can happen, but in terms of recent prison breaks, it just, my concern is not that these people will break out. I mean, I share the same concern as former Governor Democrat Sebelius of Kansas. She was not concerned they would break out of Leavenworth. Her concern is that there would be a lightning rod or a magnet that would attract Al-Qaeda types and terrorists from all around the world, and actually it could help grow domestic cells.
Here are the two big papers in Chicago. Front pages. Chicago Tribune, military tribunals in Illinois.
Yes.
Obama's plan to detain tri-terror suspects at Thomson face legal and political roadblocks. That's the Tribune, and here's the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times. Terror trials in Illinois, and they show a picture from inside the Thomson Correctional Center. Chicago is our next call. Clayton on the independent line for the congressman. Hi. Clayton, are you there?
I really can't understand, how people, I'm a World War II veteran. I'm 81 years old. And I ain't never seen so many coward people in my life. The way they call in and talk about this going to break out, that's going to break out, I just don't understand it. I thought people in the United States were strong and resilient and all of that, but it just seemed to me, especially just certain elements of the judicial system and the Republicans and some of the Democrats too, they just seem to me like they're just nothing but a bunch of wimps.
Congressman, what are you hearing from their constituents?
Well, Clayton, first of all, God bless you and thank you for your great service to this country as a World War II veteran. And that along brings, I mean, you're one of the people that fought for the security of this country. But I'm not a wimp. I don't think Governor Sebelius is a wimp. These are different from World War II soldiers that were brought to this country, the German soldiers. Many of them actually stayed here and became citizens. But the issue here is not that we should not be inviting threats to the homeland. I mean, that's what I don't understand. People say, well, we can show in our courts, we can show people, we can incarcerate them. Look at the Headley case in Chicago, Clayton, right there in your backyard. It's on a farm between my farm in Ogle County and in Chicago, where Clayton and where Headley and another actually organized in the United States with connections to Al-Qaeda, the Mumbai bombings in India 13 months ago that killed 150 people. And Janet Napolitano herself, the head of Homeland Security, says that the Al-Qaeda cells are everywhere in this country. And then we have an interesting article that appeared November 29th in the Washington Post about two Yemeni brothers. One has been incarcerated in Gitmo for 8 years, and the other one still lives in Yemen. And the one in Yemen was saying that his brother, who's been there for eight years, and the one in Yemen said, look, when President Obama says he's going to close Gitmo, we thought that they were going to release the prisoners and just close down the operation. He said, but if Gitmo prisoners are simply transferred to the United States, that will increase the hatred towards the United States and actually serve as an additional recruiting tool for people involved in terrorism. Now, this is coming out of the mouths of people who have loved ones that are terrorists themselves. That's our big concern.
We have Seaside, Oregon on the line now. Sam, Democrat, yes. You're on with the congressman. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You got any coffee there?
I'm a first-time caller.
Mm-hmm.
I started watching this program during the Lewinsky scandal, oddly enough.
Goodness.
And I've watched it ever since. I think it's the best show on TV.
It is. It's great.
Anyway, yeah, I don't have much to say except that, I'm an Iraq-era veteran, and I really do believe this is the biggest non-issue of the year. I don't care whether they're tried under the Uniform Military Code of Justice or the law of the land. They're going to be tried and hanged. I mean, they're going to have it easier in Guantanamo than any max facility, and I just don't think we're not giving them anything.
Thanks. Congressman.
Well, first of all, again, thank you for your service, Sam. The people that, let's start with this group of about 100, because in the end, it'll shake down to about 100, even though it may start at 200. This group that will come from Guantanamo Bay to the United States will find a huge increase in constitutional rights. If you don't think that's the case, just look at the talk that's going on when it was determined by Attorney General Eric Holder to have Qaeda Sheikh Mohammed tried in New York City. They're talking about Miranda warnings, they're talking about suppression hearings because of violation of Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, etc. And we also know that once you set I need some coffee. Once you set your feet on U.S. soil, you pick up all the rights that U.S. citizens, to which U.S. citizens and U.S. residents are entitled. And what that means is, and as the ACLU has been filing lawsuits and all kinds of other organizations and individual lawyers are determining, is their goal is to make sure that there are no military tribunals held, but that every person held at Thomson would have a trial in a federal court in this country. Now that's especially important because there's a brand new courthouse under construction in Rockford, Illinois. Won't be open until probably 6 or 7 months, and I can guarantee you there will be a flood of litigation going on at that local courthouse for various things, and let me run through them. Number one is the so-called Bivens rights, which occur under the Civil Rights Act. Number two, lawsuits challenging the right to detain a person in this country without a trial. That's extremely significant. We don't want that to happen in this republic. It's blatantly unconstitutional, and that's exactly what the government plans on doing with these 100 or so that will be at Thomson. Number three is mixing of regular federal prisoners along with the terrorists. That there are laws out there that may prohibit that. Number four is allowing the terrorists to have the same visitation as anybody else, because they will come in and say, look, there's no record here of any type of physical violence within the confines of this prison, and there's no reason why they can't have the most basic type of rights of association as others can do. The floodgates of litigation will be opened up, and everybody at Gitmo now who has very limited U.S. constitutional rights would have the full amount of constitutional rights once their feet set on American soil.
Our guest serving his 9th term in the House in Davis Junction, Illinois, now is calling Catherine, independent. Exactly where is Davis Junction?
That's in my district.
That's in the congressman's district. So one of your constituents.
Hi, Catherine. How are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
How's everything in Ogle County?
Well, I didn't want the Gitmo detainees coming into the United States, and now they're about 50 miles from my house.
Yep, and I live about 5 miles from you.
Yep. So I guess you were addressing some of the issues of their rights being increased to residents or citizens of the United States by just bringing them into the country. But I guess I'd like you to address maybe some of the politics within the state of Illinois to why this prison was even built and vacant, and also why this is not really Chicago. You know, out here on the other side of the state, we get a lot of Chicago's problems. They've dumped their problems out here before, and
keep the money for themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
We had a lot of, when they closed down the projects in the city, they moved a lot of their, housing project residents to we have, they're not homegrown problems. We're dealing with a lot of problems that were created in Chicago and then moved out here, so there's a lot of state politics involved with this, but I don't know if it's necessarily more dangerous because they're here, but I'm very concerned about the rights that these people have now that they're in this country.
Thanks.
Well, Catherine, the more rights they have, the more activity is involved, and the more family members and friends will be able to visit these people. And, I mean, we are dealing with 100 of the most incorrigible of the most incorrigible. People that are so violent, according to Department of Justice standards and DOD standards, and I would agree with that, that they cannot give these people either a military tribunal or a trial in the federal court system. So you would have an increase in traffic of people going right, right by our houses on Highway 72 into Thomson. That would be one type of threat that would happen. But the politics of it, Paul, is the fact that Thomson Prison was built several years ago for the purpose of closing down Pontiac Prison, which is a 100-year-old facility in Illinois. And but what happened was the prison got built. It's almost paid for, but somehow the Democratic governors Blagojevich and now Quinn say there's not enough money to operate the prison. Well, if they didn't send all the money to Chicago for projects there's somebody be enough money to open up that prison. And Catherine, with the economic analysis that I have seen, even if half of it is true, there would be enough sales tax and enough income tax revenue coming in to pay for the opening of that prison. So that should be used to house the Illinois prisoners, because I'll tell you, in a couple years, the people of Illinois are going to be asked again to say, well, we need another prison, and by the way, do you have $250 million to build the thing?
Wall Street Journal photo, Congressman, of a Todd Baker of Todd's Tackle in Thomson, hoping for more business as a result of this order by the president. So they are talking up to 3,000 jobs. A little bit more on the economic argument, Congressman. How are you balancing constituents' viewpoints between the safety, security, drawing attention to all this with the economic benefits potentially?
Well, Paul, first of all, the problem is that my constituents have never been given a security briefing. They don't know. And in fact, no less than 4 full committees of the House of Representatives, the ranking Republican members on each of them, filed the equivalent of a petition of inquiry or a resolution addressed to appropriate governmental bodies asking for information. For example, Lamar Smith is the ranking Republican member on the Judiciary Committee. He filed a resolution asking the Department of Justice to give to the American people the increase in constitutional, legal, and treaty rights that the detainees would receive once they come to the United States. The Democrats voted that down on party lines and on 3 other committees. And buried deep within the abyss of this 1,300-page omnibus appropriations bill. That's what happens when the Congress does not do its job. They slap all this stuff together and they slip language in there. And the language says, and the language actually authorizes the President of the United States to move these terrorists from Gitmo to anywhere in the United States, but the president has to show the reason for closing Gitmo, why it's being closed, the rationale, the cost to the American people, security threats of the individual, and security threats to the homeland. But all of that is to be filed in a confidential, classified report given to members of Congress, which we can't share with anybody. So the people I represent have no idea of the extent, and they will never know, the extent of the threat that is surrounding them. At least give them the same opportunity that others do, and you don't have to breach confidences in order to do that. Let them say, well, gosh, I didn't realize how dangerous this could be. Secondly, the economic activity that will take place as a result of the prison opening could also take place without the threat of terrorists being there if the state of Illinois got off its butt and did what it was supposed to do years ago and open up that prison. But because of the politics of Chicago and siphoning off the money from people downstate, they're not opening that prison.
Let's hear from Peter now, Republican caller from Tucson. What do you say, Peter?
Yeah, I think what the president should have done from the beginning was have a PR campaign for Gitmo to keep it open. You know, letting them out. Gitmo was the perfect place for these, people. And it's just like what he's doing in New York. I'm a native New Yorker. And I got friends that live right by Ground Zero now. And it's going to tie up traffic in New York and all that other mess with security and everything. So it's just going to be costing New York City, who was supposed to be going broke anyway. So basically, believe you've already addressed my comments before.
All right, Peter, thanks. Congressman, I want to jump in and get one last call from Steve in Esmond, Illinois. He's an independent. Where's Esmond?
Esmond's in our district.
Go ahead, Steve.
Esmond's located south of Rockford, approximately 10, 15 minutes. We're just off of 64 and 72 area.
Right. Hi, Steve. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
I'm sorry, but I just have to disagree with, bringing the, we need to bring the detainees here. It's not that, I guess, I'm a little nervous, but I have several neighbors here. They have sons and daughters that we sent over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and while they were there, they sent some people that were pretty bad, and they needed to get off theater, and we sent them to Gitmo. And there's a time that we just need to finish this, and if my neighbors need to get some bad guys off the theater, and we can send them in harm's way to do that, I guess we can hold them for them. It's the least we can do for them.
Congressman, final thought from you on all this.
Well, first of all, if you want to close Gitmo, take these 100 people and spread them throughout 10 or 20 different federal facilities in the country. Because that way you could solve the problem of Gitmo without creating a magnet in this country. And that would solve a lot of problems. The second thing of all is Americans are entitled to transparency. But every time we ask a question, all we're doing is asking questions. Every time we ask a question, someone says, oh, you don't need to know that. You're just an alarmist. You're just a fearmonger. And as a member of Congress, and I sit on the Terrorism Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs, I was just in Algiers, in between two Al-Qaeda attacks. And Al-Qaeda is permeated throughout the entire world. And if you listen to the words of Janet Napolitano, the head of Department of Homeland Security, Al-Qaeda attacks are very active and very numerous. Al-Qaeda cells are very active and very numerous in the United States, just looking for the opportunity to kill more Americans. Why increase the threat? Leave Gitmo open, finish up the task there, or at the minimum, maximum, take the terrorists that are there, disperse them throughout the United States so we don't have the magnetic attraction.
Representative Donald Manzullo, Republican of Illinois, 16th District, which includes Thomson. Thanks a lot for your time this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for getting two of our constituents on.
We should point out, too, that Congress, from what we read, has to vote on this move regarding the movement of the detainees to this Illinois prison, so we'll follow that part of the story as it happens.